Tom Hanks is one of the greatest actors alive. I could and should do a whole marathon one day of just Tom Hanks flicks because the guy is so full of range and able to accurately portray different characters so masterfully that even though he almost always looks the same, you can still separate him from the character. His resume is impressive, even in his early days, starring in such films as Bachelor Party and The Money Pit, among a few others, but the one early film that stands out for me and so many others even today is 1988's Big. Directed by Penny Marshall and written by Gary Ross and Ann Spielberg. Let's take a look back at Big, because let's face it, now that we are big and all of life's problems come at us daily, don't we wish we were small? If only Josh knew that. Although I guess he does find that out by the end.
You were standing in the cavern of the evil wizard.
We open on Josh, our main character, who's being yelled at by his parents for playing a video game instead of doing his chores.
I told you to take out the garbage!
Just a second!
Nothing's really changed with kids. Now through the credits, Josh meets up with his friend Billy, and I love the realism depicted here as the two talk about their teacher.
She leaned over, you can see right down her shirt.
No.
So if you get real close to the board, you can see all the way down to her flowers.
Now let's take a look back at Little Giants for a minute, a movie I love and I reviewed recently, so click the link if you're interested. Look at the way they handled this kind of thing.
My cousin told me that her and her boyfriend use their tongues.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
I know, spit swappers.
Most kids that age weren't running around being all, ew, cooties. Now see, with Big, we're not even 2 minutes into the film, and I can already tell that the writers of this movie kind of have an understanding of how boys think. We're even introduced to his crush, Cynthia, and unlike most kids in these movies, it seems he might actually have a shot with her.
Hi, Josh.
Damn, this movie's taking all the routes that the other ones don't. And this is confirmed later when Billy gets on the walkie-talkie and lets Josh know that Cynthia doesn't like Barry anymore.
So?
That's how you know it's serious. Now, presumably the next night, everyone's at the carnival, and Josh continues to be the most badass kid I've ever seen, because dig this. Spotting his crush in line for, I don't really know what the name of this ride is. Back at my local fair, it's just called the Ring of Fire. You know, the one that goes around and around and around. But anyway, seeing Cynthia in line, he tells his parents to step aside. He wants to ride this one all alone. In his own words.
I think it's something I should do.
Can the world take a lesson from this kid, please? You gotta have balls in life. Sometimes you just gotta get out there and go for it. Have some confidence.
Half hour.
It's just great to see a kid in one of these movies who's written rather strong to begin with, instead of the stereotypical bully or wussy that gets picked on. We've seen that a lot of times. Now, making his move. Oh, come on, Josh, don't be a wuss. I just talked you up.
Aren't those your parents?
Honey!
Alright, yeah, nobody can really play it cool after that. And then it gets even worse, is apparently Cynthia is there with some wanker named Derek. Ooh.
He drives.
Oh.
Go ahead. Yo, next!
All of that happened in like 1 minute, too. Wow. What a ride. Not wanting to look like a complete tool, Josh moves up to get on the ride, but having not suffered enough humiliation, he finds himself too short to ride the damn thing in the first place. Oh, you poor bastard. You should have took a cue from Trixie. I mean, I know the movie wasn't out for like another 3 years, but still. I'm feeling like his world is completely over. Oh, don't act like that's exaggeration. You know that's how that shit felt when you were that age. Josh wanders off alone, sad, and defeated, until something marvelous catches his eye. At the far end of the fair, almost forgotten it seems, sits a small machine, Zoltar, largely ignored, unassuming, and likely broken, but nonetheless it calls out for him mysteriously. For 25 cents, one can make a wish, and when Josh does,
I wish I were big.
and only after it spits out a card claiming his wish has been granted does he realize the machine wasn't even powered.
Wow.
You gotta have a storm in movies like this, otherwise how would you know that mysterious forces are at work? And the next morning when Josh wakes up, he's magically been transformed into Tom Hanks. That's even better than being big. All sorts of emotions come through when Josh realizes what has happened to him, and what follows is a few silly moments playing on the fact that he's big. Can't fit into his clothes, has to avoid Mom so she doesn't see him, and off he goes on his bike straight to the carnival, but finds the lot completely empty save some trash. God, why do people litter? Now, not knowing what to do, he races back home, attempting to explain to his mother.
It's Josh. Mom, I'm not grown.
Stop it! Move,
But she thinks he's a burglar and is terrified for her life, chasing him out the door with a knife. He goes to the only other person he thinks he can get through to, Billy.
It's Josh.
Billy also freaks out, but finally calms down when Josh starts belting out a song they often sing together as proof that he's who he says he is. You know, it's like their little thing they do. Not like a handshake, it's...
I met a girlfriend, a Trisket. She said a Trisket, a biscuit.
Do I need to take back what I said earlier about the writer knowing how boys thought back then? Like, wasn't this a girl song?
I'm cool, I'm hot. Suck you in the stomach 3 more times.
Whatever. Now, while the police are swarming Josh's house under speculation that he simply ran away, Billy sneaks out with a change of clothes for Josh and tells him to hit the next town over, which happens to be New York. There, he can lie low and look for the machine. Look, Billy's a real pal. He steals money from his dad's sock drawer to help Josh out. I'm not saying that stealing the money is okay. I'm just saying that a friend that'll go to that lengths for you, it's something. Now, once in the city, Billy helps him check into a rundown motel, promising to return tomorrow and help him locate the machine. Now, here the movie does a really great job, in no small part thanks to Tom Hanks' wonderful acting chops, capturing the real fear of a child.
Me diga que no. No, yo te dije que no. No, lo vamos a casar o no. ¿Qué tú dices?
Just imagine yourself in a situation like this at that age and then looking like that, alone in this dirty-ass hotel room. Tom Hanks just nails this.
Que no te dije, la mato, lo voy a matar. ¿Cómo que no me trata? A mí la mato. La vieja coño.
It's awfully sad. I mean, all he wanted to be was big, not all this. And the next day, the two are on the hunt for the elusive Zoltar machine, but with no luck on their side, they resort to job hunting instead as they find their funds running low. Well, maybe if you weren't splurging it on big-ass ice cream sundaes and shit.
No, Sarah.
Go ahead.
Stupid kids. Stupid kids. Now, finding an ad for a computer operator. Just think about that. The job's simply computer operator. Where do I even begin to make jokes about that? I'm just gonna let it go.
Previous employment.
No, wait.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Oh dear, thanks.
Now, the two arrive for the job interview, and for whatever reason, the most hilarious interaction ensues when the secretary mistakes Billy for Josh's son.
Okay, son, you should sit down and don't give the lady any trouble now.
It's definitely due to Tom Hanks' charm.
Sure, Dad.
And the interview starts, and... Stop clicking that fucking pen. Stop clicking that fucking pen. Stop clicking that fucking pen. Stop clicking the fucking pen. Stop clicking the fucking pen! Oh my God!
Says here you've got 4 years experience.
Yes.
All on computers.
4 years experience with computers. Now, before the boss can recognize the full extent of Josh's lies, some other woman who works there busts up in the room and starts whining about an employee beneath her who's all distracted from her job and wants her gone because it's causing her more work. I'm sorry, am I the only one who's a little pissed off at this behavior? You don't just bust up into your boss's office like that. You're interrupting Josh's time. You're interrupting the boss's time. It's unprofessional.
I really don't know where I can put her.
Put her on unemployment.
Either way, the urgency of the situation is the perfect opportunity for you-know-who, and as such, he's offered the job on the spot and starts the next day. Now, thrust right into the job with no training, things haven't changed. Some of the other employees can tell something is odd about him.
Bye.
Now, John Lovitz pops up in this movie, something I honestly forgot about, as his cubicle neighbor, and he too recognizes that something is off with him when he suggests to Josh that one of the ladies who works here is a whore, basically, and he can easily get some.
She'll wrap her legs around you so tight you'll be begging for mercy.
Well, I'll stay away from her then.
See, this is the kind of shit our movies had when we were kids. Jokes like this where, like, we didn't quite understand them, but we knew it was something probably a little dirty, and we liked it. It made us curious.
Like when we used to climb the rope in gym class.
Now, in the next scene, Josh bumps into some higher-ups making a mess of their papers, and amidst the petty argument that breaks out, he gets distracted by some cleavage.
See a doctor crying out loud, Paul. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Sorry, sir.
Man, this movie is saucy. That's a good word for it. I don't remember it being this edge of the line. He also inadvertently makes a fool out of one of the employees in the process, which is pretty funny.
Right, Paul?
Feeling utterly alone in this sea of new faces, he calls his mother on the phone and tries convincing her that Josh is fine, but she demands proof. So, to prove Josh is okay, he sings a song to her that she used to sing to him as a small child. He gets the whole office's attention, though.
Memories, like the corner of my mind.
I like this little gag here where he's watching TV and there's all these crime noises and stuff going on, and then when he turns the TV off.
Get out of the area!
It's just silly. Now, some time passes, and after receiving his first paycheck, Josh and Billy head to the toy store Josh works for and are rambunctiously playing and running all over the store in a game of laser tag until Josh gets shot and plays dead. Now, one of those higher-ups that he bumped into earlier recognizes him in his stroll around the store, and picking up on his childlike nature, he starts walking the store with him, asking what he thinks about their various toys.
Well, on the old set, you could slide the men up and down the ice, and now all they do is spin around.
You know, he's getting perspective here that you just can't get from a marketing report. Now, as the two continue their walk and chat, Josh stumbles across that big-ass keyboard for a scene that, to this day, countless people know and love. It's been satirized countless times, and I'll be damned if I can think of any right now. I think Family Guy did it. Simpsons did it. Simpsons did everything.
Simpsons did it. Simpsons did it.
Just like that, Josh is on his way up the corporate ladder, which does not sit well with those two goobs from earlier.
Vice president? He's only been here a week. Vice president?
And he came from data processing.
Now, while Josh shows Billy around his new office,
What is this?
Oh, well, they just put this in here.
the two goobs are trying to dig up dirt on him and finding nothing.
He has to come from somewhere.
I have called everywhere. Nobody's ever heard of him.
And then we get a shot that just bothers the hell out of me for its lack of subtlety.
That's just terrific. This is just terrific.
You're being paranoid.
Look, it's close enough that we can obviously tell it's Josh, fine. Then you gotta zoom in on it. Now, later on in one of the board meetings, as facts and figures are thrown about by that goob who hates him the most, Josh is just playing around with one of these toys and basically, in a matter of seconds, undermines everything that this dude just said.
It turns from a building into a robot, right?
Precisely.
Well, what's fun about that?
He's got a point.
There's a million robots that turn into something.
Soon enough, the whole room is on board with Josh's idea, a robot that transforms into a bug, and now Susan, that's her name, Susan. I still don't know the goob's name.
Right, Paul?
They're just pissed off and plotting something now. Now, meanwhile, Josh and Billy have decided to rent an enormous loft with all of Josh's money, which they fill with arcade machines, toys, and everything a kid could want. He writes his mom and dad a letter urging them not to worry about him, and yeah, now that I think about it, they don't spend really a lot of time on what the mother's dealing with, and that's a good thing. We know that she's probably suffering, and it's not that important to the plot, so kudos on that. A bit later, there's a company party underway, and when Josh shows up in his distinguished outfit, he makes his mark on everyone he encounters. Well, almost everyone. Now, Susan can't take her eyes off of Josh and eventually heads over to manipulate him, I'm sure, for nefarious purposes.
I got a car outside. You want to get out of here?
Uh-huh.
So the two leave in the company limo, and while Susan is trying to come on to him, Josh is just utterly fascinated by all the little switches and knobs and things inside of the limousine. You know, like a kid would be.
I mean, there's this invisible line, and even if you're attracted to someone,
Pretty much inviting herself up to his loft, she's in shock when she sees how he lives. Her disbelief is through the roof, but curiosity gets the best of her as Josh invites her onto the trampoline. Oh, come on, who wouldn't get on a trampoline with Tom Hanks? And also, for no reason at all,
Trampoline! Trampoline!
He said what now?
look, what it really amounts to is more interesting angles where we see Josh's age versus his physical appearance and his naivety at everything take hold. He's vulnerable, he's naive like I said, and the situation is pretty charming.
It's for you. It's a glow-in-the-dark compass ring, so you won't get lost.
Especially when you think back to that little joke at the front door.
Do you mean sleep over?
Yeah.
Okay. But I get to be on top.
Now in the next scene, Goob has picked up Susan, and the two are on their way to work, I guess, as he grills her over what happened last night, but her fidgeting with the radio and touching everything starts to get on his nerves, as it seems Josh's mannerisms and childlike nature have rubbed off on her.
Will you quit it? You have to play with everything?
For some reason I can't pinpoint, Goob decides to take him out for a game of racquetball.
Baskin?
Why does he even accept?
1918.
That's on the line.
What?
It was under the line. You said it had to be over the line on a serve.
Either way, the two get into an argument over whose serve it is, which is still pretty funny, I swear, and they fight like school children. Josh is just holding it out like a shitty kid would do. Everyone's just gathered around and laughing at them, and though we don't see the end, the aftermath is clear as afterwards Susan is tending to his bloody nose. Now she's also starting to fall for him and breaks it off with Goob, who apparently was her boyfriend. It's news to me.
First it was Tom Caulfield, then Hanlon, then Golding, then me. Am I missing somebody?
Now the next day, Billy and Josh are out celebrating Josh's birthday, and when planning all sorts of fun things for the two of them to get into, Billy is let down when Josh informs him that he has to meet someone, Susan of course, whom he takes to another carnival. She continues to fall in love with him, and he continues to explore the relationship out of both curiosity and probably necessity at this point, since he kind of works with her and doesn't know anybody. It's odd territory to say the least, but it's too bad he was distracted by Susan, because had he not been...
Want to dance?
Dance?
But I guess he might not have went there without her, he wouldn't have seen something lurking over his shoulder. Now, as the two dance, Susan makes her move, and Josh, feeling uncertain about everything, almost stops her, but he doesn't. A little awkward. He's a kid, he's a kid, he's a kid, he's a kid, he's a kid. I mean, she doesn't know, but he's a kid, he's a kid, he's a kid. I mean, it's a little weird, but it's kind of charming. What the movie's trying to say about growing up too fast, and a little bit, I guess, about Susan having trouble finding a man, but who cares? That is a man with a purpose.
Hi, everybody.
Like a new man, Josh finds himself dressed up and attending fancy dinners with Susan, fitting right into the picture like he'd always been there.
Game is to Y or X or whatever it is you're looking for.
Oh.
Now in the meantime, Billy receives a package in the mail from the Department of Consumer Affairs. I kind of skipped over this scene earlier, but when they were trying to locate the Zoltar machine, they went to City Hall and all that stuff, and, 6 weeks to get the stuff. I didn't actually think they'd bring it back, but they did, so, okay. Trying desperately to reach Josh, Billy can't get through by phone as Josh is busy being an adult now and is hard at work on his new toy proposal with Susan's help.
Yeah, it's like a living comic book. It's gonna be different every time.
Susan herself can't seem to focus on the task at hand, instead finding herself all mixed up in the emotional side of things.
What is it we're doing?
Huh?
What's going on here?
Now Josh, too immature to use words at this point, starts throwing magazines at her like a kid, which again makes me question what I said at the beginning of the movie about the writers knowing how to write what boys thought. I don't know. Now, sometime later, Billy comes running into the office, package in hand, but is a bit peeved when Josh is overly involved in his work at this point and seemingly losing focus on what matters.
I'm your best friend. What's more important than that, huh?
Upset, he leaves Josh to think about everything he said. Yeah, you could only do that in like the 1980s, and even then it looks sketchy. Grown man looking at a bunch of kids. What a sad world we live in that you can get accused of being a criminal for that. So Josh is just making his way around town, apparently, looking at all of his friends and neighbors who have probably all but forgotten him by this point, and you really do feel for him. Again, Tom Hanks is what sells this role so well, and there were other choices for this. Can you imagine Robert De Niro, John Travolta, Robin Williams, or even Harrison Ford? I love all those guys, but only Tom made this work. Now later, while having dinner with Susan, she can tell something is wrong, and when confronting him about what's bothering him, Josh finally opens up about who he really is.
I'm 13 years old.
Oh, and who isn't?
I'm going to tell you now, there ain't no magic combination of words a man can use to let his wife know that he's still a kid inside of a grown man's body. Trust me, I have tried.
There was this carnival in New Jersey. I made a wish on a machine. It was called the Zoltar machine.
Oh, stop it.
My wife ain't falling for it, and neither is Susan. Well, I guess it's time to go crawling back to Billy. It's a great moment, too, where you think that's exactly what's happening.
Josh.
The walkie-talkie in Billy's room goes off, and even he thinks it's Josh, but it's actually Josh's mom missing her son terribly.
He'll be coming back real soon. Everything's gonna be okay.
Great time to bring this in, too, because like I said earlier, we know she's hurting, and we didn't need to spend a whole lot of screen time on it, but this was a little touching scene, quick and fast, efficient way of doing it. Great job. Now Billy, knowing the truth, attempts to bring her what little peace he can, and the next day when he visits Josh at work, Susan does a double take when she spots him, considering everything Josh had told her last night. Heading straight into Josh's office, he slams the paper down and tells him exactly where the carnival is, most likely after realizing how bad his mother must feel and knowing he has his important meeting ahead of him. So Josh has a choice to make.
There's this flat screen on the inside with the...
Okay, so he chose the meeting for now. Now, Goop tries to get a bit snarky with him, throwing the same questions at him he had to deal with at his robot building pitch, but distracted entirely from the presentation, perhaps finally realizing who he is and where he needs to be, Josh excuses himself, and the reality of everything is driven home for Susan when she realizes, and bear with me because of inflation and all that, it seems like Goop thinks this is entirely too much money to be spending on a toy, so I guess only a kid, a naive, unbusiness-oriented kid would throw a number around like that, and this is what sells the idea to her that he's actually a kid.
Well, you expect a kid to pay $19 for a comic book?
I think a kid.
I don't remember how much shit cost in 1988. I was 5 years old, so whatever. Now she runs off to find him, but just misses him at the elevator. Now for plot purposes, but I forgive you, movie. Right after Josh grabs a cab, Billy spots him and overhears him say specifically where he's going, even saying it to himself aloud in celebration.
Speedway Park, Josh!
And then Susan walks out, still trying to get to the bottom of everything and asking Billy where Josh went to. Arriving by cab at the pier, Josh spots it. The machine that caused all of this. The cursed machine. This innocent-looking device that has wrought such unfortunate events in his life. The movie nails the ending. It just kills it. Inserting his quarter and unplugging the machine too, because, it might not work otherwise. Overall, you find yourself on the edge of excitement. What's Susan gonna think if it works? What's Josh gonna think if it doesn't work? Will Billy get his best friend back? I don't know, but I'm hell of invested. Now, Susan arrives just after he makes his wish, however, and pleading her heart out on how he hurt her by leaving so abruptly like that, Xandar spits out the card, which she picks up and finally comes to terms with everything.
God. You got your wish.
I don't really see how the machine just spitting out the card saying that he made the wish is what makes her realize it. I mean, it's not like he's transformed before your very eyes yet. Is that how this works? Now still, she does believe him finally, and even forgives him, and perhaps herself for all of this.
I've been thinking about it, and there's a million reasons for me to go home, but there's only one reason for me to stay.
I love the ending of this movie, because the two are spending their last few moments together, saying their goodbyes, coming to terms with everything life has dealt them in their short time together before Susan drives him on and says her final goodbye. It's really sad, honestly.
You won't even remember me.
Say what?
With that, Josh walks away from Susan, and though she turns her head for only a moment, it's just enough time for Josh to turn back into himself. It's a really great movie with a really great ending, a wonderful cast, just the right amount of silliness, and most important of all, a shitload of Tom Hanks. In the end, Mom gets her boy back, and it only makes me wonder one thing. Why didn't we get a big 2? Now hear me out on this. I'm not necessarily saying like a sequel with Tom Hanks in it, but the idea of this machine, if it can grant wishes, how many other kids out there might have had a cool wish and we could have saw that theme explored? Yeah, it might have sucked, but it might have been cool. What's the Zoltar machine doing now? I don't know, and I think that's the magic of this movie. We all wonder who else's lives that it touched, because we never found out.
What are you talking about?
Fucking love this movie.